Alright guys, welcome along to Skim Me Up Body. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart. We're getting into Star Trek, the original series in this episode with the alternative factor, episode 27 of season 1. This, for me, was a fairly decent episode, very much enjoyable, but I was just checking up on the reception of this episode, and Zach Handlin, I think that's how you pronounce his name, of the AV Club, 42 years after its initial debut, give the episode a C rating, describing the plot as baffling, unrewarding, and poorly placed. A ranking of every episode of the original series by the Hollywood.com placed this the 77th out of 79 episodes. Geek of Den in 2017 ranked the episode as the 6th worst Star Trek episode of the original series, and in 2016 CNET ranked the alternative factor as the 9th worst episode of all Star Trek, based on ratings between an audience and discussion hosts of the 50th anniversary of Star Trek convention in Las Vegas. So it seems not a very liked episode, but for me, the ending to this episode is one of these ones that you kind of think about once in a while. Now, to jump over to an older series, Space 1999, I do recall an episode of that where one of the characters ends up, I'm not going to get into too many details, of course we're not talking about Space 1999, but essentially at the end of the episode of that, this main character, who was a bit of a tit, let's just say, through the whole episode, just really annoying, got the opportunity to return to Earth through suspended animation on another spaceship, and the deal with that was the people of Moonbase Alpha in that series had to draw straws, more or less, and whoever won would be the one that would go back with them. And they drawing straws is probably not it, but that's the essential part of it. Is there was like a lotto to win it. So having been an asshole, he pulls rank and gets himself in there for the suspended animation, only to be done over by the guys in the spaceship was taking him back. They made the life support chamber malfunction, so he'll be awake the whole time he's on it. So at the end of the episode, he's kind of screaming as the spaceship goes off into space, and he's trapped in this glass box, more or less, and he's going to be awake for the... Essentially, it kind of left it where it was a life support machine which is going to keep him alive, and he's trapped inside it. And it's, you kind of think to yourself once in a while at the end of that episode, as the spaceship's going off and you can hear the sort of screams of him, that this thing is, he's pretty much going to live his whole life out without, he's just going to be there. It's not going to let him starve to death. It's not going to let him, he's going to be there until he actually drops dead of old age, more or less. So that sort of thing kind of sticks in the head, and you kind of think about it every once in a while. And in this episode of Star Trek, you do get this kind of finale in here as well. So I didn't really explain that well, but at some point in this podcast we will be hitting Space 1999, because it is a flippin' great show. So in the episode, the Enterprise is getting rocked by an energy pulse, and Spock informs Kirk that the gravity pull of the planet they're orbiting fluctuated to zero, and the surrounding space momentarily winked out of existence. Sensors locate a human presence on the planet that wasn't there before this happened. Spock and Kirk beam down to the planet to find a one-man spaceship, and this trampy looking man, let's just say, doesn't look good. He's obviously been through something. His name's Lazarus. He appears, falls off a cliff, he's injured, and Kirk hasn't been back to the Enterprise for examination. So back on the ship, Lieutenant Masters informs Captain Kirk that the mysterious disturbance has drained the dilithium crystals and the warp drive of the ship. A message from Starfleet reports that every quadrant has been subjected to the same winking out effect and electronic disruption. So this hasn't just happened on the planet, this has happened galaxy-wide, basically. Starfleet fears that the disruption may be a prelude to an invasion, and they order the Enterprise to leave the area. Kirk's ordered to find the cause of the disturbance. Lazarus, every once in a while, he fades in and out of the universe, encountering a lookalike enemy in a dimensional corridor. So this is the thing that's kind of threw people off in those reviews there. Then kind of like, what way did they put it? Let's just check that out again. Where did I read that at? I saying that was the plot, describing the plot as baffling, unrewarding. Baffling, I kind of get. Every time this happens to Lazarus in the episode, it goes to like a negative image. And if you don't know what a negative image is, I'm talking about photography, the negatives from, the old photographs. A lot of kids these days have got no actual memory of that sort of thing, but I'm an old fart, so it is what it is. But you see this guy, and he's fighting essentially himself every time it skips this, and he fades out of the universe, and you see him struggling hand-to-hand combat, and comes back and to the universe again. And it does, parts of the episode do get baffling. There's times where he's got an injury to his forehead. The next time they see him, he doesn't have an injury to his forehead, so it's almost as if he's switching places with this person each time. It's a different version of Lazarus on and off throughout the episode. Not very well explained, but it's science fiction. It is what it is. You're either going to get it or you're not going to get it. And for me, I got it. So this happens. There's an energy wink every time this happens. So, it's the universe is potentially drifting in and out of existence, and every time it does, he's fighting himself. Spock reports a rip in space and time on the planet. Lazarus says that his enemy is trying to destroy the universe, causing the phenomenon. Lazarus demands the dilithium crystals from the Enterprise so they can fix the ship and continue to fight his enemy. He wants to take him out. Kirk refuses, so Lazarus steals the dilithium from the Enterprise and gets caught. Lazarus denies the theft and blames it on the other version of him. So Kirk beams back to the planet with Lazarus and a security team to seek this enemy out. Lazarus has another dimensional corridor episode and is returned to the sick bay. Lazarus explains to Kirk that he is a time traveler. His spaceship was actually a dimensional corridor gateway, and the planet below was once his home world. Lazarus claims his enemy destroyed his civilization in the past, for which Lazarus has been chasing him for centuries. Kirk's puzzled by Lazarus leaping in the universe. 1 minute he's wounded and insane, the next minute he's strong and rational. So that kind of just cover that. You'd think I would read my notes better before I start recording the episodes. Both Kirk and Spock realise the answer is that Lazarus is actually two different people, two different beings. One belongs to this universe, and Sceam and the other antimatter version. The way they describe it is, you've got matter and antimatter, which is like because this is matter and antimatter, big thing in Star Trek. It's like the perfect balance between the two keeps engines running, sort of thing. But if they do meet uncontrolled, there will be an explosion. Kirk and Mr. Spock developed the hypothesis that Lazarus' enemy is the counterpart from the antimatter universe, and the universe is the matter universe. If he and his anti-self contact each other within the physical universe, either this dimension or the other dimension, they would annihilate both matter and antimatter universes. So if they ever come into contact with each other in the real world, as long as he's bleeping out and he's like this corridor between the two universes, or the two mirror universes, yeah, they can fight away to his heart's content there. But if they come into the real world and this side or the other, they're going to destroy everything. Lazarus, he manages to slip away from the sick bay and creates a diversion by engineering. Falling over my words next. Yeah, he gets away from the sick bay, creates a diversion and engineering, and while they're dealing with that, he gets a dilithium with the stolen crystals. He beams down to the planet to repair a ship. Kirk, of course, goes down after him, but the time machine activates just as Kirk enters the ship, and Kirk's teleported over to the antimatter universe where he meets the anti-Lazarus. And the anti-Lazarus admits to stealing the Enterprise's dilithium to prevent his doppelganger from using it to invade the antimatter universe. So this is the logical one, so to speak. When I thought to myself, they're referring him to the antimatter version, I would have thought the antimatter version of Lazarus would be the crazy, demented one, and the matter version would be the sane one, but that's back to front here. But it is what it is. He tells Kirk the only way to stop this is by destroying Lazarus' ship, which would also destroy the other ship and the other dimension. So it's like the two doors to a gateway. If you destroy one, it'll take out the other. The gateway in between, of course, as we've seen, the negative kind of looking shot where these two people are fighting each other. The two Lazaruses have to be inside the negative magnetic dimensional corridor which links the two universes, and this guy decides, the only way we can stop this, the reason this version of Lazarus wants to kill the other version is because when he discovered the existence of another parallel universe, another version of himself, he went crazy. And he doesn't want there to be another version of himself. There could be countless different parallel universes, and in each one, technically, there's going to be a version of you or me in there in each different one of them. So this guy goes crazy thinking that there's another version of himself, and he wants to kill that version of himself. He wants to be the only one, sort of a thing. So this version of Lazarus says, okay, I'll get him into the corridor, I'll start fighting with him, and when I'm doing that, destroy the ship. That will cut the two universes off, and no matter what way this plays out, at some point or another, are going to meet each other in reality, whether it be his own reality or Kirk's reality. When that happens, that reality is going to blink out of existence, and decides to sacrifice himself to save both parallel universes, which means in the corridor, time doesn't exist in there. So when this all goes down and Kirk destroys the ship, cutting off the two doorways to this corridor, these guys are going to be caught in the middle, fighting for all eternity. That does happen at the end of the episode, and the two Lazaruses get caught in the corridor, and of course, at the end of each episode, you have that little moment on the Enterprise where they're kind of talking about everything that happens. And, he's sitting on the bridge of the Enterprise, Kirk is, and the ship's phasers target the dimensional ship. They destroy it, leaving the two Lazaruses to meet one more time in the fight inside the dimensional corridor and be trapped there forever on the ship. Kirk muses, although the universes are safe for you and me, the two Lazaruses are trapped forever. But what of Lazarus? What of Lazarus? And that is the end of the episode. I think, for me, it was a decent episode. Not one of the best by any stretch of the imagination, but it's one of those endings where, in this case, two characters, two versions of the one character, end up in a struggle face to face with each other for all eternity, with no escape, no death, just a madman at his throat, as I think that Kirk actually put it in the episode. Lazarus trapped for all eternity with a madman at his throat. For me, that's the kind of storytelling that kind of sticks in my head. As I said at the opening of this podcast episode, there's an old version of Space 1999 where a similar fate happened to a character, and I never forgot that episode. And the first time I'd seen that episode of Space 1999, I think I was probably, gosh, I wasn't that old at the time, probably 8, 9 years old whenever I seen that episode. Probably younger, in all fairness. And it stuck with me for years and years. And, after a certain amount of time, you kind of forget the content of a lot of episodes. And I remember watching a rerun of Space 1999 with the brother like 5 or 6 years back. And this episode popped up. And I didn't recall the episode as I was watching it. And I just remembered the scenario of this guy getting trapped in this glass cage at the end of the episode, the ship flying off. And as we got to that there, I was just like, boom, straight back to that 7 or 8 year old, whatever time I had originally seen it. And I was just like, this is it. This is it. And a few other little things I got there. There's an old show called, I'm jumping all over the show here, but it's Ulysses 31, animated show from the early 80s. And there was like a nightmare sequence in one of those episodes. And I can recall that sequence clearly. Had no idea where I had seen it. I'd seen it originally in the 80s when the show was on television, animated show, and had this nightmare sequence in it. And there's a certain section of that animated show where it just stuck in my head for ages. I had no idea where I had seen it. I just knew I had seen it somewhere, and every once in a while this would pop into my head. And then again, as I was doing a run through of that show years and years later, this sequence pops up and I'm like, there it is right there. So the kind of storytelling that leaves something in the back of your head that's just kind of there. You may have forgotten most of it, but a little piece of it is just in the back of your head because it's memorable. That's what I kind of got from this episode of Star Trek, even though it was poorly placed in rankings from the AV Club, Geek It Then, and CNET. For me, very much an enjoyable episode. So, yes, I'm looking forward to doing the next podcast. A very, very good episode up next for Star Trek, the original series, The City on the Edge of Forever. Looking forward to having a little chat about that. So we'll do that on the next episode. So until then, guys, stay safe, and I will talk to you all later. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.